Boreal forests occur in the high latitudes of the northern hemisphere, in a 400 to 600 kilometer wide band across North America, Scandinavia, and Siberia. They're the most extensive of all the forest types, comprising roughly a third of all forests. The climate is extremely harsh, with a short growing season of only 3 to 4 months where temperatures may reach 20 degrees C, and a long winter with temperatures falling as low as minus 50 degrees C. Precipitation is rather low, and the cold air holds little moisture, so the environment tends to be very dry. Boreal forests contain few tree species, some of which form nearly pure stands. The evergreen conifers, including spruce, fir, and pine, are the most common trees in boreal forests. The typical conical shape of conifers is an adaptation to capturing light at low sun angles, with no branch fully shading the ones below it. The steep cone shape also helps these trees to shed snow. The needle-shaped leaves of conifers allows them to remain evergreen by helping them withstand the extremely dry air. A broadleaf has a very large surface area for evaporative water loss. Broadleaf trees must thus lose their leaves during dry or winter months to conserve water. The needle, on the other hand, minimizes the surface-to-volume ratio of the leaf, keeping water loss to a minimum. Needle-leaf trees can therefore keep their leaves throughout the winter, allowing them to take full advantage of the short growing season because they don't waste any time growing new leaves each spring. To withstand the cold temperatures, needle-leaf evergreens have special adaptations to avoid damage to their tissues freezing. Since water expands when it freezes, plant cells can burst if the tissues freeze. Boreal conifers can avoid this by pumping extra water out of their cells. During this cold hardening process, which takes place in autumn, water binds to the cell walls outside the cells, where it does not pose a risk to the cell itself. Conifers also tend to be shallowly rooted, keeping their roots above the permafrost layer at about 30 centimeters deep, below which the ground is always frozen. In some areas within the boreal zone, especially toward the southern limit, and anywhere water is more abundant and temperatures not as cold, conifers may mix with deciduous broadleaf trees such as aspens, birches, and willows. These fast-growing tree species have large vessels scattered throughout their wood that helps them survive and overcome freezing temperatures. In other areas, especially at the northern edge of the boreal zone, where the permafrost layer is near the surface and most trees can no longer survive, deciduous conifers, called larches, are found. These conifers lose their needles in winter to survive the extreme cold and dryness. Boreal forests have rather low productivity because of the short growing season, but also because decomposition rates in the cold soils are very slow. Thus, tree growth is limited by the rate at which nutrients become available. The slow decomposition rates also means that organic matter builds up in the soil. This long-term accumulation of organic material makes the peat soils of boreal forests the world's largest storehouse of terrestrial carbon, representing about 50% of all the carbon stored in the world's forest ecosystems. Compare this to 14% for temperate and 37% for tropical forest systems. Ecologically, boreal forests have relatively low diversity. Few species have adapted to the harsh climate. Other than berry species found in the forest understory, most of the plants do not rely on animals for pollination or seed dispersal, but instead rely on wind. Large mammals like bear and caribou forage on berries or lichens. With low human density in boreal regions, these forests suffer most from natural disturbances like fire and pest outbreaks. Nonetheless, about 20% of this forest type has been lost due to logging, and climate change poses an increasing threat.